Today on The Riff, Jeremy and Justin talk about consistency. How do you know when to keep going and when to stop? What does it mean to be consistent? We hope today is helpful and hopeful. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to another episode of The Riff. I'm Jeremy and I'm with...
It's Justin.
It's Justin.
We're in a new studio.
We're in, I was going to say brand new studio. It's not brand new, but for us, it feels like it because it's new to us.
Yeah.
So give us a little tour. What do we need to know?
Well,
there's something different to our viewers if they're joining us on YouTube.
If you're a viewer, the creative team surprised us.
Little gift.
They are sweethearts.
While it was a surprise, it's not surprising because they're like that.
They're so thoughtful. But you're going to notice a little neon sign that says The Riff.
Yeah.
That is classy.
Yeah. I thought it was a lispy way to say sheriff.
There's a
Sheriff. But now that they say it, I'm like, no, that makes sense. The Riff.
Yeah, it's the Riff. Yeah. Okay.
And then when they presented that, did you know immediately what room we were going to put it in?
I was thinking our office, but then it made more sense when we were looking around and we were like, oh, we're going to do a podcast in there.
Some people don't know that we office together. We do.
Really?
If there's one person I see more than any other person, it's you.
Yeah.
And you and me.
Yeah.
Someone said this.
What'd they say?
A recent guest said they like the chemistry between us.
What?
Yeah.
No, they did not.
No, they did. Yeah, they did. It was Phil Wickwer, our last guest.
Oh, I love Phil Wickwer.
And if you listen to, it was last episode, if you listen to the episode, Phil was a football coach for Justin. He was a Willard Tiger back in the day.
Listen, I'm never going to pick a fight with Phil Wickwer, but if I were...
Threw you under the bus, didn't he?
Yeah. He really, if you didn't listen last week, he talked about my career in sports.
Yeah.
And kind of just bypassed it.
Yeah.
Went straight to Jamie.
Well, to be fair, she was a college athlete.
Well, because Jamie played in college.
Yeah.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
That means that a college just signed her. That's all it means.
100%.
A college didn't sign me. That's it. That's the only difference.
Yeah. And you would have.
For sure.
You were only one offer away from doing the same thing.
I was one offer away.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much the same. So I don't know why he had to do that. That was
no.
It's fine. It's fine.
Jealousy doesn't look good.
It doesn't. Well, I'm glad to be here in our new space.
Yeah, this is good. And here's what you're going to notice, Riff listeners. 90% of our whining is going to just go out the door. We're not going to whine about it being too hot.
Okay.
We're not going to whine about it being too cold.
Okay.
Because we have a climate controlled environment
there's a thermostat and everything.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's fancy. So anyway, so that's the Riff. So Justin, what are we talking about today?
All right, today, after listening to Wick on the last episode, I kept thinking, Wickwer was one of the first people, other than my parents, that I really learned discipline from. And not just like discipline, but a day in, day out commitment to continually get better.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy, he was monumental in my high school days. And he still has that, right? He just, when you talk to him, you're like, I want to go work out right now. He's just that. Did you feel that? Did you go work out right after?
I was going to say, I like him. I'd love to sit across the booth at Waffle House from him. That's kind of where I was going, but a same thing.
Right. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
But I got to thinking just about leaders in my life, mentors in my life, people in my life that I look up to. And one of the key pieces that I look at that I'm like, oh, I really love that about them and learning it from them is consistency.
Yeah.
So whether that be in health or whether that be in spirituality, whether that be in your marriage, I think consistency is key.
Yeah.
And you talk about it a lot. You've always said from the day I've met you, where it's faithful, fruitful. And that's awesome to say that the day I meet you. It's pretty cool to see it 12 years after that it's true and that you actually live it out. So I want to talk about it. I want to find out what makes you work in that way. And then I also just want to hopefully give some handles to people that might be in a space right now where they're like, bah. Because I also think this. I think that there's a difference between stopping something and quitting.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. That's good.
And there's a lot of church conferences we go to where I get so upset where they're just like, just don't quit. Just keep going. I'm like, actually, to stay consistent, you need to stop a few things. right?
Yeah.
Like, so it actually, stopping could be healthy. Quitting and giving up, that probably is not. Giving up is not healthy. Stopping is. Anyways, all of that, I want to talk about all of that. I want to get your perspective on it. I want to figure it out for all of the listeners. And by the end of this 30 minutes, they're like, wow, that was the best riff ever.
Yeah.
Which isn't saying a lot.
Well, I mean, it would be top 150. Like we're around 150.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Which, side note, I hope you didn't lock the door, because I would imagine any of these episodes, someone's going to come in and burst us with a bunch of balloons and some cake.
There were a lot of people in the warehouse. Did you see them all?
Yeah.
I think they were either getting a printer out or they were
Printer.
So,
Or 150 is a big deal.
I know. I can't wait to see how many balloons they get us.
Yeah. So let's talk consistency. One of the things that I read so many years ago from John Maxwell, and he's kind of been something he continually talks about, is his 5 levels of influence, right? And they all start with the letter P, so they're easy to remember. That he says, the first level is your position, right? It's the lowest level of influence, is because that's, you're the boss, right? Or, and we think of it like a substitute teacher back in the day when I was a kid. It's like, well, just because you are told you're in charge of me, we have no relationship. It's the lowest level of influence. But then you go from position to permission. I'd like to follow you, right? There's a connection, right? So you go position, lowest level, permission, you have some influence. Then it's production. People follow you because you're doing something good. Like, I don't even need to know you well. Like, if we go back to Wickwer last week episode, if he wanted to talk about physical training, I'm listening, because it's obvious he knows what he's talking about. He's got some production, right? Sometimes if you're good, even if you're not a person, in other situations, you can look at someone who might not be a person of character, and you're still going to listen to some things they say in an area. So permission is followed by production, and then it's just people development. Is they are able to now have so many people they've trained and discipled. And then the last one that Maxwell says is personhood. You've been doing this long enough. It's just who you are. And so what he says is, lowest level is, it's a title. Highest level is, and I think that's what we're talking about, consistency. You have had such a streak of, not perfection, but consistent rhythms in your life, that's where you have the most influence. So it doesn't surprise me when you say, man, the people that have shaped you the most over time, it's that consistency. I think there's something there to it, So
yeah. So I want to ask, when do you stop, right? So I think that I want to talk about consistency, and I want to talk about continually just going. But when is it healthy in order to stay consistent to stop something? Because again, it really drives me crazy at those conferences where I'm like, no, like you're going to ruin your marriage if you keep going at this pace, right?
Yeah.
So it's this weird like juxtaposition, this whole like, wait, how does that work? So how has that kind of taken shape in your life?
Yeah, I think having the courage to quit the thing that you're supposed to quit, having the faith to continue the thing you're supposed to continue, and not get those backwards, right? So, Henry Cloud's got a great book on necessary endings. And it's just this idea of healthy cycles. There are things that you have to give them the gift of goodbye, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all right. Every time you say hi to something, you probably have to say goodbye to something, because you don't increase your capacity by just accumulating. That's a hoarder mentality. And so as a church, we can't be addicted to the success of the last season that we eliminate potential for the next season. And a church becomes unhealthy when we refuse to quit offering something the way we used to offer it just because it worked. A terrible excuse to continue doing something is because it has worked. So for example, let's talk about give back. One of the legendary things about North Point when I came here, it was totally new to me. I mean, this is something from when Tommy launched a church and it became a big distinctive, is this idea of serving, second Saturdays. and I don't know if that was the original version of it, but when I got here, it was second Saturdays. Every second Saturday, like clockwork, you would get a couple hundred people together and you'd go do something very unique in the community. And it was awesome. And over the years, it's changed. We have a dream center, and the dream center is awesome. Because we're committed to the principle, because we're committed to the mission, we have to hold loosely the method, so the model, right? And we've talked about it even on this before, is you marry the mission, you date the model. Don't marry the model, right? Because then you get stuck. But so in order to be committed to what you're called to do, you have to be willing to say no to things that used to serve you well. I know in a career-wise, it's motivational to inspire someone to not quit, but Paul in scripture, he quit stuff all the time, and not because he was a quitter, because he understood his mission. And sometimes when you have a strong enough it's easy to say no. And so if I'm saying no to something, the most exciting no's in my life are because I've got a really exciting that I'm saying yes to that requires me to say no. If I'm saying no because I just don't like something, that's not inspiring. So quitting's a big deal. So think about it, like, what are some things that you quit that you were like, it was actually a win for you? Whether it's life, career.
Yeah, I think that I struggled with this a ton, like early on in marriage.
Okay.
Because I felt like I couldn't quit anything. I mentioned this, we had a really rough 2 years when we got married. And I had this idea that I'm like, I just have to be consistent in everything within marriage. Like anything and everything, where it actually gave me the inverse product that I was hoping for, because I couldn't focus on anything. So I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And I remember it so vivid, like it's insanely vivid in my mind. I remember where we were. I remember it was Valentine's Day. It was crazy. And I really realized I have to quit X, Y, and Z, because what I'm really committed to and I want to be consistent in is being married to Jamie and having a good marriage. That's it. That's the missional part of this. I can quit everything else other than that mission, which makes everything else look different. And I think it's the same thing with church, and how you've led has been so awesome because it is that. I think honestly, North Point could quit everything except for being a safe place to find and follow Jesus. Like, that's the missional part of it, right?
Yeah.
We could probably quit Sundays. I'm serious.
We
we actually did for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But seriously, I think that's the part where you can find true consistency, because the consistency for me now is getting aligned with what the mission is.
Yes.
It's not exactly what you're saying. It's not the methods to get to that mission. So,
right.
So yeah, I quit. I'm not a great gift giver. I'm not.
I've noticed.
So I'm
just kidding. I don't, because I'm not a gift guy either.
No. And there were so many. Like, I really tried. There's just part of me, I don't like getting gifts as well. I'm not like a gift guy. I'm like, I don't know. So I quit giving them. I still give them, but there's a thing in my mind now that I'm like, I'm never going to be like the greatest gift giver because it's not a passion. And the gift giving isn't going to get me ultimately to the mission of Jamie and having a marriage with her that we both love. So within my gift giving now, I'm not going to say I didn't quit trying, but I quit putting the pressure on me to make it the perfect gift. And so now I literally just ask him, like, hey, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want me to get you? And then she'll tell me. And is it romantic? No. Is it effective? Yes. It's much better than me trying to guess and then clamming up and not getting anything and then getting mad at myself and then forget. Like, it was just horrible. So I quit trying. Yeah.
And that's where my marriage just took off.
And that's where, but it really is like, there's moments where I'm just trying to figure out, like, does this really serve the mission of getting us to the next space in marriage? Probably not. Let's figure something else out. I know that's a small example, but that is a very vivid one in my mind that I'm just like, I'll tweak it and I'll change it. So
I think that mission filter is the right filter, because a lot of people will sacrifice the mission because they refuse to quit the method. Even if we were talking about marriage, we stuck with that. Is, for example, let's talk about going out for drinks with guys, right? And this isn't a bashing alcohol deal, but let's say that me going out for drinks with the guys, or me playing in another softball league, or going golfing a third day, or whatever it might be, that is an irritant to your spouse. I've seen different ones, and I've been the guy in different situations saying it is unreasonable for you to expect me not to hang out with my friends. It's unreasonable that I can't play in the city wiffle ball league. It's unreasonable for you, because this is what guys do. And that is true. That is what a lot of guys do. But if I dig my heels on this, not understanding, if I claim consistency in this area because I've always done that and everyone else does it and I should be able to do it, I need to understand I'm threatening consistency in something that's a lot more valuable, right? And we do that with business. We could do it with business. We do it with church. And you can argue, like In-N-Out's amazing because they only have a certain amount of menu items. And they don't mess with it. Well, I think In-N-Out's amazing because they're only located in places you go on vacation. And so you have great nostalgia towards it, right? So whatever. Is it their key really that they don't offer spicy chicken? I don't know. That's where they really take off. But we think about it in church stuff is like,
that's so true. Let's stop for just a minute, because every time I leave In-N-Out, I'm like, that was normal.
Yeah, and you find out about 10 minutes why they call it In-N-Out. Where's the bathroom?
Then when I get to Springfield, they're like, "Where'd you go?" I'm like, In-N-Out. Yeah. It was awesome.
You're like,
was it?
Black sheep dominates
right?
In-N-Out, but it's not vacation. So, you know what? That's a real reason why there are so many old grumpy people in Florida, because they spent, and I'm going to be one of them one day. Okay. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just observing out loud, because so many people spent vacations in this exotic place. And they're like, this is awesome. I can't wait to move here. The problem is, once they moved here, they realize they ain't on vacation anymore. Right. And now they're old and grumpy and they don't know where else they can be happy. So I don't know. What are we talking about today? Consistency.
Oh yeah, consistency.
But consistency in the right areas. You have to be willing to let other things die. As a parent, it's true. You got to think, okay, you got to identify what is my ultimate mission as a parent, as a spouse, as a leader in an organization, someone serving the community. What is my ultimate mission? So what must I hold tightly? What must I be willing to let everything change? Where am I willing to fail, right? I'm not willing to fail my marriage, right? I'm willing to fail a lot of things, though, because I don't want to fail my marriage. And if we can identify what we're all right failing, then I think that could be a step towards making sure we do everything possible to succeed in the areas that matter the most.
So let's talk about spirituality, because I've gone in ebbs and flows of this for a long time, of trying to stay consistent, right? Yeah. And what does that actually mean when you talk about spirituality? And a lot of times I think we can think of being consistent in spirituality as the things that we do.
Yes.
I read this, I pray this, I do this. And all of those
7 chapters a day, right? And 20 minutes per.
All of those are extremely important. Yes.
Disciplines, yeah.
And there have been moments in my life where it's ebbed and flowed, especially with reading scripture.
Yeah.
And I've figured out other ways to get scripture into my mind, whether it be via a podcast or an audiobook or someone reading it to me on the Bible app.
I love reading that to you. Or are you?
No, like not
audio.
Not the Monday thing that we do where you read. No.
Where should I start today?
Yeah.
2 Thessalonians.
Titus, please. So I think that it's really important, I think, to hear from you of what does that look like? Because I have almost become legalistic in it at times, to where I get into a space and it's not helpful.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what I want to be consistent in is seeking after God.
Yes.
That's my consistency. So what does that look like for you? How does that work?
Yeah.
Somebody that's kind of walking through that right now, what do you say to them?
I love the question. I love the conversation. I think it's very helpful for everybody, every one of us listening. So I would say my walk with Jesus has been very consistent in the sense it's predictable, right? For me, I'm rarely in a spot in my spiritual life I'm like, how did I get here? And again, that doesn't mean that it's been free from struggles or challenges or times where it felt more vibrant or very isolated. But as a general rule, when I look over my life, I'm like, it's pretty consistent. But what I've done to do that is very inconsistent. So I've done like read the Bible in a year, many years, right? Which I actually think is good to get it in you at some point, right? At some point where you cram it and cram it and cram it. I found the best way for me to hear God is to memorize a lot of or to get very familiar with a lot of what's already written down there. Because usually it's my recall that reminds me what I need to know when I need to know it. And so I'm glad that there's been seasons where I'm cramming it. Now, I don't do that. I'm not doing that this year because for me, I don't need to read Leviticus from front to back in 6 days in order for, but there's a season where that was helpful to understand what it is. But for me, it could be like, okay, I'm going to do a season where I'm reading a ton of scripture. I could be a season where I'm reading a book of someone else's thoughts on scripture and presentations of scripture. It could be a time where I'm journaling a lot, whatever it might be, that is very inconsistent. Whereas Leanne, she's super consistent. Like she's got her chair, she's got her journal, she's got her Bible and her book, and she's like clockwork, right? And that's like this season of the last several years of her life is where that's a good rhythm for her. And so I'm not pro, anti any rhythm. I'm just pro that you have a rhythm, even if you change your rhythm all the time. So for me, what I want to do, exactly what you said, I want to get scripture in me every day because I want to be a person who reflects the values of God. It's helpful to get those values in me, to think about them. Every time I spend time getting scripture in me, it reminds me any disconnect, right? And so there's lots of ways to do that. I want to, but even beyond scripture, because for a big part of history, there wasn't scripture. And we can have fun debates about which 66 books belong, why 66, why these 66, all those things. You could take some of those books out of the Bible and I'd be fine.
Name them.
I'd probably, okay. I'll say Leviticus.
What?
Yeah, I know.
What?
And again, I'm not like starting a petition that we should at this point. And I'm not saying there's nothing we can not learn from it. I'm just saying for most of human history, that wasn't available. Either it wasn't recorded yet or it wasn't widespread and distributed. Until Gutenberg and the printing press, most people never had access to this, yet there were rich followers of God and followers of Jesus. So there's just, why I say that is not saying I'm anti-scripture. For sure, I'm like, hey, we've got it, let's take advantage of it, let's get it in us. But there are other rhythms to be able to line up my walk in a way to receive from God and reflect the values of God. And I think 21st century Christianity underestimates some of those. And so whether it's these walks, whether it's these thoughtful meditations, whether it's all these different other ways to pause and to say, okay, what's something that's going to help you reflect on your day and identify specifically what was not a fruit that you're proud of. And then project on your next day. What must I be in line with? Why is this important? And figure out different triggers. And if that's you reading 7 chapters a day and you have time to do that, great. But I just know way too many people who are very disciplined in religious things that skip the whole reflect, align, project, and commit vibe. And when we don't do that, all we become is consistent in our practices and unpredictable in our character. What I want predictable character, predictable reflection, even if how the method is unpredictable. So now what needs to be predictable is my character. My Leanne, I don't want to throw Leanne a surprise party with my character. That's not going to be helpful for my marriage. And I'm not saying you can't recover from instances, and I'm not saying that we don't have to have alignment conversations with my attitude and all those kind of things. That happens. But overall, I need to be consistent how I show up as a husband. I need to be consistent how I show up as a dad. And what that means is when I don't show up the way, I recognize it quickly and I'm open to the conversation.
I think it's important too. Kind of going back to what you were saying too about like going out with the guys or doing this or doing that. A lot of times guys that I'll talk to, are like, well, that's what gives me life, man. Like, you want me to stay consistent in my character. Like, I got to do these things. And I'm like, I've always thought, and this is something that I feel like I've learned from you. I don't know if you've ever said it, but you've done it. I've never seen you do something that brings you life, that brings death to somebody that's really, really close to you. So that, for me, I'm like, there's so many ways to get life. There's so many ways to get re-energized. Like, do I have to do that one thing? Especially if it's hurting the person that I actually care about the most, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it makes me think of that, and it makes me think, you never said that. Have you ever said that?
There have been times where I've had to adjust because what was really life-giving for me wasn't life-giving for Leanne. Right. And for me, it revolves around sports, usually participating or watching it. And so I can get life from watching sports, participating in sports, and if I do it a lot more, I get a lot more life. I could play pickleball a lot more than I currently play, and I would feel great about it. Matter of fact, I'd feel healthier. It'd be great. But I also realize there is that tension, and so I'm not going to put the onus on Leanne of like, what are you asking of me? Do you want me not to like have an outlet? There's worse outlets out there than pickleball, right? No, that's an unrealistic request that I'm projecting on her. What she's saying is, hey, Friday mornings on our day off, I either have to get up earlier than I want to, or I have to pick another time. That's a practical way where I'm not going to be the dude who complains about my wife at the pickleball court on Friday, talking about how I had to get here and she was whining about it. I'm going to be the guy who's hanging out at First Watch with her on Friday and trying to figure out where else I'm going to fit some pickleball in. Those are practical things.
The First Watch? You've always said First Watch is a little bougie for you.
Okay, to be honest. And I don't know the owners of First Watch. I did read about some of that in the newspaper recently, but I don't know them. So I don't know if they're North Pointers, but I don't prefer First Watch.
What?
I think it is bougie. And but great example, Leanne loves First Watch. So Leanne doesn't like Waffle House.
What?
Yeah.
Has she been?
Oh, many times. Every Christmas Eve we go. Every Christmas Eve.
I don't know why she wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I know.
This is weird.
I know. I think it's the thickness of the napkins.
Yeah.
They're pretty. Yeah, they're just not great.
Yes.
So little things like, okay, I have to pick. How do I, win there? How do I win at home? Same with the girls. Like when Sydney played tennis, the danger there is Janaea was easy. She was coming to life and thriving in an area I wasn't great at, theater. Okay. So I'm like, cool. I've got no expectations, just cheering her on. Very easy. When Sydney decided to play tennis, she was a really good tennis player. All of a sudden I was like, cool. I know how to play tennis real well. And I can be really critical of it because I'm good at that. And I realized, that's not winning for her. I've got to be willing to sacrifice my advice and insight into the game and be the dad, not the coach, right? And so you got to choose what's the mission, where do I want to win, and be willing to let everything else slide.
And I think that's the key. I've learned from you of if you want to be consistent, be really focused on what you're being consistent in. Yeah. Meaning that consistency better have a large missional element.
Component. Yes, has to.
Right? Like that's the consistency. That's great.
Well, think about North Point. Okay, so if we were, I was talking to some pastors this week about like training. Like we were talking about what are some good exercises for their leadership team to think about how they're doing, kind of a strat ops vibe. And so one of the things I was thinking about, here's always helpful. identify 7 areas that you're trying to accomplish as a church, whether it's like discipleship, evangelism, whatever it might be. And then you say, okay, rate yourself on each of them. Okay. And then which one is the weakest element, and bring some attention to that. Okay. This is some basic leadership stuff, right? But as I think about that, North Point, the challenge could be, okay, so we say safe place. We want to be a safe place, not just be a safe place so that people hear from Jesus. So our number one thing is, how do we get a message from Jesus? How do we create an environment where people hear the message of Jesus and remove as many distractions as possible, okay? And so that's number one. Well, a lot of times people would be like, okay, your mission giving or your strategic discipleship process, or that isn't as high. Well, a temptation could be to feel insecure about that and say, okay, let's focus on this above all else because it's not as high. And we're willing, now, these other things are important too. And we need to address them. We need to have good conversations. But we're willing to be disproportionate in our mission because that's our mission. And then resource as much as possible so that we're as healthy as possible for anybody who's on this journey. But we refuse to be an average blend of every expectation of a church. And over the years, it's tougher. When you're new, it's cool. Like you got this niche and that's what you're known for. But over the years, there's this missional pull that people have so that they bring this element from this experience and this element. And eventually, if you listen to everybody, you're just going to be an average beast of everything. And we don't need that. Now, it's not an excuse to ignore the other important elements, but it's always important to guard your missional distinctive. And our missional distinctive, even in the Bible Belt, is to be a place where you can show up and not have Bible experience, not have church experience, or have the worst kind of both of those. And you're going to show up and you're going to hear from Jesus. Everything else, while important, is secondary to that number one mission. We just want to hear from Jesus.
And that's consistency.
That's consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I've met the previous pastor, Tommy, who launched this church. And I know a lot of people who know us both. And I never got the feeling from any of those conversations that we're two peas in a pod. But one thing that I feel like from my perspective is he was passionate about that mission, and I'm passionate about that mission. And even though we have way different approaches to how we get there, the consistency of North Point is the mission, is the mission. I think that's important. Identify what the mission is. Identify what the hill that you wouldn't want to die on is. I don't know if I said that right. Identify the thing that you would die for or wouldn't die for.
That you would die on.
No,
you would want to die on.
You would. I mean, I don't want to.
No,
willing to.
No. Willing to die on that hill.
Desiring is stronger. That's stronger. It's not a wish, but it's a will. Identify what the mission is. So here would be a question for all of us to think about. What's something that I'm consistent in right now that isn't helping my most important objectives? What am I consistent in at work that isn't actually helping? What am I consistent in at home or away from home that's not helping my home? And this is called discipleship. What am I consistent in my life that needs to change if I want to be better connected to Jesus? And be willing to let that's where your necessary ending is. Quit that.
For sure.
And then what are some things then that you need to be consistent in? What words must I be consistent to say to my kids, to my wife, at work, to my team? What words do I need to hear? What do I need to get in my faith walk?
And I'd also say, don't think about it. Write it down.
It's good.
So at least for me, anytime I write it down, it's a game changer.
You scare me if you write something down because you got this brain that traps almost everything. And if you're writing something down, I'm like, whatever you're writing down, that's like Moses chiseling something right there.
Oh, that's why I use stone tablets. I don't even have a pen. It takes a while. But yeah, I do. I think that writing it down is, do you journal? This is off topic.
I do.
Journal? You do journal?
I do journal.
I don't journal. And
okay, when I say I journal, that doesn't mean like, hey, it's Tuesday. I journal. And it's not a diary. I could see what you're,
that's what I'm getting. Do you have a diary? I saw.
It's locked and you would never know if I did. And I use codes. So yeah, good luck cracking that sucker. Dude, Nicolas Cage couldn't crack it in the best movie.
What was his best movie?
Well, I would say Con Air.
Whoa. I was going to say
part of it is because
Face Off.
that was my first ever hair dryer. Was also a Con Air. And so I don't know. I just
Do you remember Face Off?
Face Off was good. Wasn't Travolta in that one too?
Faces?
John Travolta.
Can you imagine the creative meeting? They're like, guys, I got this idea. Yeah. I mean, how did that get made? Anyways.
It's probably based off of a Broadway play.
For sure.
Most good movies are.
Yeah, but journaling.
Oh, yeah, codes.
Yeah, I gotta start journaling, I guess. I don't know.
No. I'm not a proponent of it. I'm a proponent of.
You sounded like it. You were very quick to say yes.
Yeah, why am I denying?
Yeah,
I feel I'm insecure. I'm a proponent of communicating to what you're thinking. Yes. Getting it out. And for me, journaling helps. Typing helps better than writing for me now. Used to be a writer, really? But now I type. I've got a journal. I've got a journal doc. I got a lot of hidden docs. So that's one
actually do. I'm going to tell a secret and then we'll get off here. But I don't know if this is a secret. So when I started working with you, you gave me like in this capacity, you gave me like everything North Point, right? Like all these documents, files. You're like, hey, walk through this. For the first year, I'm just like, I am like studying this stuff. I'm like, I gotta learn it. About an end of a year, I'm like, okay, I think I'm on track. And then we'll have a conversation, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, well that too. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then you'll throw me a random file with so much more info. And I'm like, wait, what's this? And you're like, oh, this is just on my computer. And you've done that for a decade now. So I don't know how much stuff you've got, but you...
Have you seen Beautiful Mind where the guy's kind of insane? I like that movie because I feel like he gets me.
I'm not even against you having that mind. I'm just like, hey, you could just give me all the files. Like we don't have to. I don't want to feel like
I'll tell you a little bit about that since we're just riffing. I start collecting data and I start sorting data, and I'm not even confident in the data yet. And so it's not until I've got a good rhythm of the stuff that I'm like, I think I see something here. I don't want to wait. I don't want to share it until I know that it's valuable.
Until you see. I'm just going to give you an example here, listeners. He gave me a file of certain phrases that we had said online in social media, the screenshot of what it was for like the last 2 years. I'm like, this stuff's gold. And you're like, yeah, it's just something I threw together.
How many shares, how many comments, how many engagements?
It was like the greatest data.
I don't know.
It was so incredible.
If I thought it was great, I would have shared it on Basecamp.
Well, it was awesome.
I do want to say this, though. One of the things about writing that you mentioned in a podcast earlier that I think is so valuable, and Leanne listened to that podcast, and her question was, why don't we do that? Is what you and Jamie, at the beginning of the year, you went and you did an intentional getaway, and you wrote down goals, right?
For sure.
So when you say that whole writing thing, I think that's a very, and you've been very instrumental in the role here of getting leadership, whether it's strat ops or different functioning, getting us together and make it more intentional instead of just something we feel. How do we go beyond intuition and make it intention? And so I love how you have been able to write out, map out, and it gets people on the same page. So maybe you're listening, and that would be a good step for you in a parenting, in a work setting, in a spouse deal. I don't remember what podcast it is on, but just saying, hey, let's write down these goals. Let's walk through it. I think that's powerful. That was good.
Good. Well,
I need to do that.
I do believe it's key. Yeah. I believe you lead the way in it. And this is like episode 150, 151?
I don't know.
It's consistent.
That is consistent. Oh, and then part of the consistency is you do it when you don't like. If it's important, do it when you don't feel like it.
Right.
And do it when you do feel like it. Right.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it when you feel like it. And that's been a lot of times we're like, hey, but we need it.
You feel like doing another one after this one?
I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Consistency.
It's very consistent.
Isn't that it? So maybe we'll see you next Monday. Maybe not. Who knows?
Whoa, we'll see if it's missional. I can't wait.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.